Okay, so once you've downloaded the folder called Form Validation, you can double click and we'll take a peek inside. And what you'll see is a folder called Validation, and inside of that folder is a JavaScript file which contains the routines that will go through the process of validating the form on the client side. We will also have 3 text documents that we will open and paste the contents into our contact form at various points throughout this tutorial. Finally, we have an image which will act as a visual reference for our visitors to indicate to them they will need to change something or add to the form in order to complete the form process. So you should have a contact folder, and inside of that will be an images folder and a CSS folder containing our CSS style sheet for the form, and of course our contact.html form sitting inside the site's root. So let's click on the validation folder and drag it over to the files panel, and then we can hover the mouse pointer over the contacts folder. You will see a plus icon which indicates that you can release the mouse and place the validation folder into the contact folder, and here you will see it occupy the spine of the contact folder below the CSS and images folder. Next, let's click and drag our image named X over to the images folder, and we'll drop our image inside. And you'll see it appear inside of the images folder, and if you want you can click on the minus icon to smarten up the files panel. Lastly, we'll select all 3 of our text documents, which we will delete as we go through the tutorial once we have finished with them. But for now we'll select them all and drag them over until the mouse pointer is hovering over the main site's root, and release them, and they should drop just below our contact form. Okay, let's load up our contact form by double clicking upon it in the files panel, and after that we'll split the screen to expose the code view. If we go right to the top of the page where we have our document type declaration and head data, and if we place our cursor at the closing head tag, and then we'll go over to our files panel and we'll double click on the text document called head.txt. Now in each text document there are some instructions, and in this case there is a small message from me instructing you to paste the code below into the head of the contact form. So we'll highlight the code starting from the bottom and rising upwards until we have highlighted all of the code in the document. We'll then copy the code by right clicking and selecting copy from the menu, and we'll close the text document down. Now if you highlight from the bottom of the closing head tag up to the top of the page, highlighting all of the document type declaration, then right click and paste in the code that we copied just now. And what we've just pasted in was the same doc type but with some added JavaScript variables and some of our PHP form processing script, which includes email injection and field validation. Right now Dreamweaver is not recognizing the code as PHP because our page is still a HTML document. So we're going to close the page down now and save the changes. We'll head over to the files panel and click once on our contact form page, and after a moment click on it again. We'll be able to rename the page as contact.php. Now we'll double click to reopen the page, and you'll notice in code view that Dreamweaver has recognised the PHP and has applied a default code colouring scheme to it. Now users of Dreamweaver CS5 will notice this new warning bar widget, which is reminding us that we have not defined a testing server. We're going to switch it off in the preferences menu because otherwise it will keep bugging us throughout the rest of this tutorial. So we'll go to edit, then preferences, and making sure we're still inside of the general tab where the enable related files tab is checked, we'll change it from manually discovering dynamic files to disabled. And that will temporarily disable the warning bar for this session, and if we close the page and then reopen the page, we will then see the warning bar will not bother us, at least for the rest of this tutorial. Right, well we're finished with our head.txt file, so we're going to delete that. So select the file from the files panel and then press delete on the keyboard, and don't worry because you will still have your originals in the download file. Now if we just take a look at the email variables, and the email to variable is the email account that you want the messages from your form to be sent to. So I'm going to put my Dreamweaver tutorial email address in here, and you should put the email address you want your messages from your form sent to. The email subject will be the subject line that is sent along with the email message, allowing you to identify it. You may want to have more than one form on your website, so it will be helpful to put different subject lines so that you can identify which form the message came from. So the next thing we're going to do is to click inside of the Your Name label, which will make it easier for us to find the label inside of code view. Remember that we created these value fields earlier, but we have left them blank. Well, now we are going to paste some PHP syntax inside of them. So in the Files panel, open up your php.txt file. So I've made this text file pretty straightforward, and at the top of the text file you will see the first instruction, which tells you to paste the code below into the value section of the form input. So highlight the first line of validation code and then right click to copy, or press Ctrl C to copy. And if we go back to our contacts form, we can paste the code into the value field by either right clicking to paste or Ctrl V to paste. The next line of code we're going to place just after the closing of the full name input tag. So if we go back to the text document and copy our next piece of code, and the instructions tell you to paste the code after the close of the full name input. So back into the form, you will see the close of the full name input denoted by an orange angle bracket. Paste your code just after the bracket, making sure you are still inside of the input div. So if we look in design view, we can see that we have our PHP anchor tags, and inside of the input area we have an entry which pertains to the PHP that we pasted into the value field. And part of what this code does is to check that someone has entered their name into this field, and if, let's say, they make a mistake somewhere in the form and the form doesn't pass validation once submitted, well, the form will post the data entered previously back into the form so that the user doesn't have to type all of the data again, like the name, email address and comment. So let's place our cursor into the email address field in the design view. And we'll highlight our next snippet of code, which we will copy, either right click and copy or press Ctrl C to copy. And let's paste this code in the value field of the email input. And once you've done that, let's head back to the text document. We'll copy the next snippet of code, and this snippet of code needs to be pasted after the closing angle bracket of the email input. So either right click and copy or press Ctrl C to copy and paste this code after the closing orange coloured angle bracket of the email input. And now if we look inside of design view, we should see another visual reference, this time referring to the email address signified by the 3 PHP anchor tags and a reference inside of the input for the email address form.email. Okay, so for the text area tag, we cannot paste our code into the value attribute because the text area doesn't support a value attribute. So instead we will paste our code between the opening and closing text area tags. So if we locate our next snippet of code, and just above you'll see a message from me telling you to paste this code in between the text area tags. So if you copy that, and we'll paste the code in between the text area tags there. And this code just checks that a message or some text has been placed into the text area by the web user. Now this next bit of code we will paste just after the closing text area tag. So right click and copy or press Ctrl C to copy. We'll head back into our form page and paste that code just after the close of the text area tag. And that second snippet of code will spew out a validation message to the form user if they submit the form without typing a message into the message text area. And again, you should see 3 PHP anchor tags and a reference inside of the text area form.comment. Okay, next we're going to place a message that will appear after the form has been submitted and successfully passes our form validation, and it'll be a simple message that you can amend to whatever you like. Let's copy it by right clicking and selecting copy. And now back to our form page, and we're going to paste this code just after the submit button. So click on the submit button, which will highlight the code inside of code view. And we'll paste the code in just after the submit button code. So right click and paste. And if you refresh the page by pressing F5, you will see the thank you message appear between 2 PHP anchor tags there. Now we're going to go to the top of our form and type in some HTML. So if you scroll up to the div with an ID of form, which should be on or around line 88, and we're going to wrap our form inside of some form tags. So I'm going to type form, and then we'll scroll down to the bottom of our form to just below our submit button, and there we'll place a closing form tag. So create a space and just below the submit button and type the closing form tag. And then inside of design view, Once you've done that, you should see that the form area has been wrapped with a red border, which is Dreamweaver's way of telling you that there is a form inside. Okay, so we only have to paste one more piece of code into our contact form, and this snippet of code should be pasted into our form just after the div with an ID of form. So if you highlight this line of code and then we'll right click to copy or press Ctrl C to copy, and if we scroll up to the top of our form where we will find our div with the ID of form and make a space, and then we can paste the code just below the ID of form. And when you press refresh, any syntax errors that may have been present will then go away. And what this code does is to check that the form has been completed, and if it has, it will display the thank you message that we pasted in just prior to this if statement. Okay, now just below the if statement that we just pasted in, we're going to add some code to our form tag, and we'll give the form an action, and the action will be contact.php, and the method of sending the contact.php form will be post. And we'll also give our form an ID of comments_form, and this is the ID and trigger that our JavaScript validation file will use to carry out its validation routines. Okay, so believe it or not, you now have a functioning contact form which will not only send the form to the email address that you specified, but it will also validate the form and the form fields too using PHP. Now, the next thing we will tackle in this tutorial is transferring these contact form files and folders over to the files panel of your defined website, and then uploading the files to your web server so that you can test out your form server side. Okay, we no longer need this text document, so shut it down and delete it from your files panel in Dreamweaver. And don't worry, because you still have your downloaded copy. So when we upload our files to our website, we should have a page that looks very close to this example. So let's move our contact page files into our website. So what you should now do is switch to your website which you have defined in Dreamweaver. So I'm switching over to the Dreamweaver tutorial website. I'll shut down the contact form page. Now, we generally want our contact form to sit along the site route as you would for most of your main landing pages. So if it is sitting in my Dreamweaver tutorial website, the path to it would be dreamweavertutorial.co.uk/contact.php. It's a good practice to place your contact form in your site route, so that's what we're going to do. So switching over to my desktop, I'll just move the form validation download to one side, and I'll now locate the contact form site that we defined at the start of the tutorial. And here it is. I'll go inside the folder, and these are the files that you will move into your website. So let's bring up Dreamweaver and place the open folder on top of the Dreamweaver panel, which will make it easier for us to transfer the files over. So you should have the contact folder, the contact page itself, and a text document which contains our JavaScript, which we will still need to implement. So highlight all of the files, and we're going to click and drag all three files together, and we'll hover the tip of our cursor over the main working folder of our site until you see the plus icon appear. Then you can let go of your mouse and the files will be placed into your site. So you should see the contact folder somewhere along your site route, and inside of the folder you will see a validation folder with a JavaScript file inside. There will also be an images folder containing one image and a folder with a CSS file for our contact form. Somewhere at the bottom of your files panel you should see your contact.php web page. Now I still have my current contact form page still lying in my files panel, and in fact I'll delete it now so that you don't get confused. Lastly, there is a text document to which I've placed a script link inside. So let's now click and highlight our contact.php page, and if you hold the control key we can also left click upon our contact folder so that we can upload both files together to our hosting server. So click on the put files arrow inside of the files panel, and that will begin the process of uploading the files to your hosting server, and there should be about 5 files in total being uploaded. Now the next thing to do is to open up your website, and the path will be your website's name /contact.php. Okay, so your contact page should be looking very similar to my contact page here, and straight off the bat we're going to click on the send message button to test our PHP form validation. So if you click that button now, Okay, so we can see that our page did validate, although we have some design issues that really we would only be able to tackle once the form was uploaded to a server to test. But our validation requested a name, an email address, and for a message before it would submit. Now the validation error messages are appearing, but they are displacing our form fields, and it doesn't look very professional at all. So the first thing we shall fix is the placement of these error messages. We would like them to appear just below each respective form field. So back in Dreamweaver now, let's open up our contact form page, and we'll need to switch to our CSS file. So click the CSS file next to the source code, and the first selector we are going to add to will be the selector with the class of .detail, which will target both the name field input and the email field input. So once you've found it, we are going to set a display property, and we'll set the display to block. We're also going to target the selector below with the class of mess, and that will target the message text area, and we'll add the same display block property to the mess selector. And we'll press F5 to refresh the page, and you'll see the page now looks a little smarter. And what the display block property does is, in this example, is to take any element that does not fit into the defined width and height, which in this case is the validation error message, and forces it down to the next available space just below. Okay, so I'm switching back to the CSS file, and we're going to re-upload it to our hosting server, and we don't need to put any dependent files as we have only amended our CSS file. Okay, so once that's uploaded, we can go back to the browser and refresh the contact form, and we'll click on the submit button again to make sure that our validation error messages behave like we want them to. So if you go ahead and click on the send message button, and that's much better. Our validation messages are appearing just below each input area, and they look nice and neat the way they are supposed to. Now one thing you'll notice is a quick flash as the page goes away to validate and then returns with the outcome of the validation. So I'll just reset the page again and show you the flash, and if I press the send message button again, you'll see that it goes away really quickly and then returns the validation result. Well, we want our form validation to validate instantly in the browser with no delay, and we can achieve that using JavaScript validation. Now we should just check that each input works the way it's supposed to, so I'll fill in the name and then send a message, and that validates. I'll put in an email address, and by the way, this is not my email address, so don't send any message to it, and I'll send a message, and that also validates. And finally, I'll put in a small message to check the validation and then click submit, and then we should get our thank you message to show that the form has been validated and has been sent. We also need to style the thank you message, and we can do that later on when we begin to tidy up our form. Okay, so I'll just reset the form, and one of the other things I would like to do, other than the instant client-side validation, is to make the validation error messages more visible. Now we could do that by changing the color of the validation text, but instead I'd like to add a visual clue in the form of an image at the start of the error text. So I've included one image that we can use, and we'll go about adding that after our client-side validation. So let's go back to Dreamweaver. We'll switch back to the source code, and if you scroll down and navigate to the start of our document type declaration, and we're going to add a script link just below our CSS file link. So place your cursor there, and if we open up the last text document called MooTools script link and highlight the code and right click or Control C to copy and close the text file down, and then we'll paste the script link just below our CSS file, and this is the hosted Google version of the MooTools library. And this library link is necessary to interact with the JavaScript file we will be attaching now, which will perform our form validation. So just below this script link, we're going to create another script link by typing script type equals, and we're going to select text and JavaScript from the drop down menu, space src for source, and then we'll press enter so that we can browse for the JavaScript file in Dreamweaver. And the file we're looking for is in our contact folder, so press enter to browse and go to the contact folder, and then double click to go into the validation folder and select the validation JavaScript file, and that will add the file to the script hook. And then we'll close off with a closing angle bracket and then a closing script tag. Okay, so if you press F5 to refresh, and if you look to the top of the open web page, you'll see that the library and the validation JavaScript file has been attached to our contact form page. Okay, so now we have attached our JavaScript hooks, we can re-upload the page to our hosting server. So we'll click to put the file, and there's no need to put dependent files as we've already uploaded them prior. So we can select no to put independent files. And then once the web page has been uploaded, we can refresh our contact form, and you should see that the form gives back instant validation results, or client-side validation, as opposed to the server-side PHP validation that we've already put into place. So I'll click send message, and you can see there is no delay in the validation result. Now the JavaScript client-side validation adds a nice professional touch. If the web visitor has their JavaScript turned off in the browser like some people do, then the validation will revert back to the PHP server-side validation, and that's really great for helping to stop spam bots or other programs from getting through your validation process. Now I'm just checking that all of the fields validate, and you should do so too. So I'm going through each one, submitting the form to make sure that the form validates instantly and that it follows correct syntax. The form is working as it should do, and now just to check that the form submits and returns our thank you message, and that's working just fine also. Okay, so back to Dreamweaver now. Let's attach the image to the front of our validation error messages on our form, and we can do that by switching to our CSS style sheet for the form, and we need to create a new selector. So go to the bottom of the style sheet, and the validation messages appear inside of a span tag. And we'll create the selector to target the span tag. So let's type span.error, open and close curly braces, and if you wanted to change the color of the error message text, which is currently black, you can change it here by adding a color property, but I'm going to keep mine as black. Now the next property that we are going to add is to display block. We'll also set the font family to Arial. We'll set the font size to 12 pixels, and we'll add our background image. So that's background dash image colon, and then we'll browse inside of the contacts folder, find the images folder, and then we'll select our image, and it should be the only image inside of the images folder there. So double click upon it, and that should add it to our style sheet. Make sure you add the semicolon onto the end. Okay, let's press refresh, and we can now see the images repeating, so we will need to set the background repeat property to no repeat. So I'm going to type in the style sheet background dash repeat colon no dash repeat, and we're also going to set a background position, and we'll set it to as far left as possible and 6 pixels vertically to align it to display in the center of the error text. We'll also add a padding on the left of 25 pixels, and you'll see some movement inside of design view when you refresh the page. Okay, so let's upload our style sheet to our hosting server. So we'll click to put the file, save any changes, and we don't need to put dependent files here either. Okay, so let's go back to our contact form in the browser, and we'll refresh and test that the image has been attached properly to our style sheet. So we just really need to click on the submit button. So I'll click to send a message. Now that's great because the image is attached properly, but there is a delay between the error text returning and the image returning, and that is because the image is being requested in a separate server request. Now if you miss a delay, I won't be able to show you again in this browser because the image has now been cached, so I'll copy the link and show you again in Firefox, and then look carefully for the loading delay of the image. So I'll just paste the link into the Firefox browser and then submit the form again by pressing send message, and you can see the image will load in after the validation error message. Okay, so it doesn't look too good having our message appear first and then our image appear afterwards. I'd really like the image and message to appear as one entity. So we'll need to preload our image as the form loads, and we can do that using Dreamweaver behaviors. So place your cursor just below the body tag and we'll go up to the window and select behaviors from the drop down menu. And if you click on the plus icon in the behaviors panel, and you can then select the preload images option from the drop down menu. Now this will open up the preload images panel, and this will allow you to add as many images as you would like to have priority preload before the page loads up. So I'm going to click the browse button and then find the image that we would like to preload in the images folder. So double click upon it to add it to the preload images list, and if you wanted to add more you could click on the plus icon, but we only have one image to load, so press OK, and you'll see in the code that JavaScript function has been added and the script call added to the body selector, which calls upon the function above to load the image as the page loads. So after you've done that, you will need to put the contact page to your hosting server. So click upon the put files icon to upload the page, and then we can test it in a browser. And as the page has already been cached in Firefox and Chrome, I'll load up Internet Explorer to check that the image will load automatically and together with the error message text. So here is Explorer, and I'll paste in the link to the contact page, and hopefully the image will have preloaded ready for and with the output of the error message text. So I'll just click on the send message button and we get our image output immediately with our error message text, and this gives us a much more professional look and feel to our contact form. Okay, so next we'll put a message at the top of our form to encourage the web visitor to leave a message or some sort of feedback. So create a space just below the form wrap div, and we will place a H2 tag there, and inside the tag we will type something like "we appreciate your feedback." Then press F5 to refresh the page, and you'll see that the title has been placed just above the form inputs. So let's switch to our style sheet and style the text, and we'll create a new selector to target the H2. So that will be £form wrap space H2 open and close curly braces, and we'll set the font family to be Arial. We'll set a text shadow which will be 1 pixel, 1 pixel, 1 pixel blur radius pound CCC, and we'll set the text color, a hexadecimal color pound 255 E67, and we'll set a margin left of 25 pixels to push the H2 away from the edge. And now when we refresh, we can see that our message is more in keeping with the styling of the form. Next we'll style the thank you message that appears after the form is validated. So go down to the bottom of the form where we have our thank you message, and if you highlight the code it will also be highlighted inside of code view. And for this thank you message we will apply some inline styling, and the first style we will change will be the font size, which we will set to 35 pixels. We'll also set the font family, and we'll set the font family in keeping with the rest of the form to Arial, and we'll set the text color to be £255 E67, just like the welcome message at the top of the form. Okay, so press refresh and you will see the thank you message output will be much larger. Okay, now let's put the files to our hosting server. So click on the put files icon, and we need to put our CSS file to our host too, but I'm going to say no to the dependent files and then switch to the CSS file and upload that separately. So once you've uploaded the contact form, switch over to your CSS file and upload that too. Make sure to save any changes, and again we do not want to put dependent files, so just put the CSS file as it is. Okay, now let's load up the contact form and check our changes. Make sure to refresh your form before doing so, and I'm going to fill in the form to pass validation straight away to check the formatting of our message at the end. So once the form passes validation, we get our thank you message here, and I think we'll move the thank you message over 25 pixels, and then we can set a page redirect after a period of say 5 seconds to our index page, or you can redirect the page to wherever you want to. Okay, so let's move our thank you message over by 25 pixels, and we'll set a margin dash left colon 25 pixels and a semicolon on the end. and that change has already taken effect inside of Design View. So just below the thank you message paragraph, create a space ensuring that you're still inside of the if else statement, and we'll open a script tag, and the type will be text/JavaScript, and we'll also close the script tag so that Dreamweaver will recognize any code we place inside as JavaScript. And inside we'll set a timeout for our redirect function. So I'll type set timeout. Make sure you have the capital T there, and inside of the parentheses we will name the function we are going to set, and I think we'll call it our redirect to make it easier for you to understand. And we'll place a comma and then set our time delay, which we will set to 5,000 milliseconds, or 5 seconds in layman's terms. And you'll see that Dreamweaver is showing a code hint, albeit a little bit too late as we've almost finished. Okay, so that has set the time delay for our function which we are about to write, and we name the function our redirect. So add the parentheses, and then if you open up a curly brace, and then we'll set our redirect location on another line and type location.href is equal to, and I'm going to put index.html inside of mine, but of course you can redirect to wherever you want to, maybe a sales page or maybe back to the contact form. It's up to you. And then we'll close the curly brace off, and that will complete our redirection JavaScript. And of course we will need to test the redirect, but first we need to re-upload our contact form. So click on the put files icon, and again we'll say no to put independent files. And once that's uploaded, we can go back to our contact form, and I'll quickly fill in all of the form fields so we can check that our thank you message has moved over by 25 pixels, and that the form upon validation and completion will then redirect. So I'll click the send message button, and the form will validate now and show us the edited thank you message, and then we'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we have our redirect result. Okay, now for some additional styling, we can change the colour of our input fields and add a focus so that once the form is clicked upon, the colour will change, in this case to white, which helps to give some feedback to the user as to the position of their cursor using this simple colour changing interactivity. So I'm going to change my layout to split vertically so I can display the form fields next to the CSS styles I'm about to create. And you can do the same if you wish to. So I'm going to switch to the CSS style sheet, and the first thing we are going to do is to add the necessary properties to our form fields, to add rounded corners and a different color background. So we need to go to our .detail selector and our .mesh selector, and we'll start by adding a border radius to our name and email address form fields, and I'm going to use a generic border radius property which will work in Chrome, Safari and the most up-to-date versions of Firefox. And you should use the -moz and -webkit prefixes to retroactively target older versions of Gecko and WebKit based browsers. This will also be the correct syntax to target Internet Explorer 9 too. So this will add rounded corners to our form fields. We'll also change the background colour to £E9, E9, E9, and you'll see a light coloured grey if you look inside of Design View after refreshing the page. And you may also notice that the form has broken slightly, but we are in mid-transition of a styling change and we'll take care of that later. So now we'll add a 1 pixel solid border of grey, so that's 1 pixel solid £CCC, and our form will break even more, but if you have what I have on your screen, then that is a good sign. Okay, so to save time retyping these properties for our text area, we will copy the styles over to the .mesh selector. So copy using Ctrl+C and paste the styles into the .mesh selector using Ctrl+V. And if we scroll down to our message text area, it should be greyed out just like our other form fields. Now we're going to add a pseudo selector which will change the colour of the background and border when someone clicks inside of a form field. So we'll type .detail : focus, and this will target our form fields with a class of detail, the name and email fields. So we'll change the background colour, so that's background dash colour, and we'll change the background to white £FFF, and we'll also change the border colour to 1 pixel solid £999. And we'll also remove the outline of the form field, which is the default blue border that gets placed inside of Safari's form fields, and the light brown that gets placed inside of Chrome form fields. So we'll change the border outline to none. Now you won't see any change in design view as this selector doesn't get to work until an action is completed in the browser, but we'll copy this selector and paste it just below and rename to .mess to target our message text area as well. So rename to .mess. Okay, so now although the form looks broken inside of design view of Dreamweaver, if you uploaded this form now you would see a perfectly designed form inside of a browser. But I want to make sure this also displays great inside of design view, so we're going to make a couple of changes to the code which won't really affect the form in a browser but will make the form display correctly in Dreamweaver. So find your .input selector just above the detail selector and comment out the width of auto. And we'll also specify a set width, which will be 260 pixels plus 8 pixels of padding on either side of the input form field, and we'll give a little bit of breathing space to the input area of say another 9 pixels. So we'll put 285 pixels as our width. And inside of design view you'll see that your name and your email address form fields have corrected themselves, but again this is only an aesthetic design change for the Dreamweaver design view pane. Now because we gave the input div a set width of 285 pixels and our message text area which is 450 pixels was also linked to that input div, we will need to create a new selector for our message text area. But this won't be too much hassle as all we will do is to copy our .input selector and then paste it below, and then we can change the width to the width of our message text area which is 450 pixels. But we also need to add the padding on either side, so that will be or that will make it 466 pixels, and then we can simply rename the selector to input2. So go to .row.input and change that to input2, and then if we switch to our HTML source code and then click inside of the message text area to pinpoint the selector in our HTML code, and here is the input div just above our text area, let's rename the input div to input2 so that the CSS selector can style it. And you'll see that the width has extended to fit the text area. So now that we've made Dreamweaver happy, re-upload your contact form to your host by clicking on the Put Files icon. And we'll also need to re-upload our CSS style sheet. So once the form is uploaded, switch to your CSS style sheet and then put that to your hosting server too. Make sure to save any changes, and you can also say no to dependent files. And if you view your form in a browser, you should now have your completed result. You'll notice the new grayed out form fields and text area, our nicely rounded form field input areas, and when we click inside of an input area the color changes to white and tells the user that they are focused in on that form field. Okay, I think we're finished. All that's left for you to do is to check your email inbox for all the test messages you've been sending yourself. I tested this form on GoDaddy, HostGator and PowerWeb hosting servers, and all messages were returned inside of 5 minutes. Some were instant. It all depends on your hosting company and the plan you are on, so be a little bit more patient when waiting for the message to arrive in your inbox. I hope you've enjoyed this Dreamweaver tutorial. Please stop by the website and sign up to my newsletter. The link is in the description box below. And this has been James at dreamweavertutorial.co.uk. Bye for now.